For 28 years, I believed family meant everything. I was Maya Rodriguez, the reliable daughter who never said no, the sister who always opened her wallet, the one who kept our family financially afloat through every crisis. But when my sister Jessica stood up at our parents' anniversary dinner last month, wine glass raised high, and declared me the family's ATM, while everyone laughed and clinched their glasses, something inside me shattered completely. What happened next would destroy everything I thought I knew about blood loyalty and the people I had sacrificed my entire adult life to protect. Before we dive into how one dinner comment led me to discover the most devastating family conspiracy imaginable, I want to know where you are watching from tonight. Are you someone who has ever felt taken advantage of by family? Drop your location in the comments and hit that like button if you are ready for a story about what happens when the family doormat finally grows a spine. Trust me, you will want to subscribe because what my family did next will absolutely blow your mind. The morning after that anniversary dinner, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with the wine. Jessica's words kept echoing in my head, but it was not just what she said. It was how everyone reacted. My parents laughed. My brother Marcus nodded knowingly. Even my grandmother smiled like she was proud of the joke. 28 years of being their financial safety net, and this was how they saw me. I had been the family's emergency fund since I graduated college. When Marcus needed money for his failed restaurant venture, I wrote the check. When Jessica's husband lost his job and they faced foreclosure, I covered their mortgage for 8 months. When my parents' roof needed replacing, when my cousin needed bail money, when anyone in our extended family faced a financial crisis, they called Maya. And I always said yes. But sitting in my apartment that morning, staring at my coffee growing cold, I realized something had been bothering me for months. The requests for money had become more frequent, more casual. Jessica would text me asking for grocery money like she was asking about the weather. Marcus would call needing car repairs, with the confidence of someone ordering takeout. My parents had started mentioning their bills in conversation, not even directly asking anymore, just dropping hints until I offered to help. I decided to look at my bank statements. Really look at them. What I found made my hands shake. Over the past 3 years, I had given my family over $200,000. 200,000. The number stared back at me from my laptop screen like an accusation. I was a software engineer with a good salary, but I was not wealthy. That money represented my entire savings, my emergency fund money I had been setting aside for my own future, my own dreams of buying a house, maybe starting my own tech consulting business. But the real shock came when I started digging deeper. I called Jessica's mortgage company pretending to be her, asking about payment history. They told me her mortgage had been current for over a year. Current. I had been sending her mortgage payments for 8 months, convinced she was on the verge of foreclosure, but her mortgage was already paid off. The lies began unraveling like a cheap sweater. Marcus's restaurant had never failed because he never opened one. He had taken my $50,000 and bought himself a brand new truck and a boat. My parents' roof was never damaged. I drove by their house and saw the same roof that had been there for 15 years, perfectly intact. I sat in my car outside their house for an hour, my mind reeling. Every sob story, every emergency, every crisis that had tugged at my heartstrings and opened my wallet had been a lie. But why? Why would they do this to me? The answer came when I decided to do something I had never done before. I followed Marcus. I know how crazy that sounds, but I needed to understand. On Thursday afternoon, I parked across from his apartment and waited. At 2 p.m., he came out, but he was not alone. Jessica was with him. They got into his truck and drove to a part of town I had never seen them visit before. They pulled into the parking lot of an upscale restaurant, the kind of place that charges $30 for an appetizer. Through the window, I watched them meet with a man in an expensive suit. They were celebrating something, laughing, shaking hands. When the man left, they stayed behind, and I managed to get close enough to hear pieces of their conversation. Maya's good for at least another 50 this month. Jessica was saying, scrolling through her phone. I will tell her the kids need school supplies and the car broke down. She is so gullible, Marcus replied, cutting into what looked like a $40 steak. Remember when you told her about the medical bills? She did not even ask to see them. They were planning their next con, right there in public over expensive food that I had unknowingly paid for. My sister pulled out a notebook, an actual notebook where she had been tracking my payments, planning future lies, calculating how much they could squeeze out of me before I caught on. But the worst part, the part that made me grip the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, was when Marcus said, "We should probably slow down soon. Maya's smart, and she is going to figure it out eventually." Jessica laughed the same laugh I had heard at countless family dinners, the laugh of my childhood. Are you kidding? She will never figure it out. She wants to be needed too badly. As long as we keep playing the struggling family members, she will keep writing checks. It is like having our own personal bank account. I drove home in a daze. 28 years of family loyalty. And this was how they really saw me. Not as a sister, not as a daughter, but as a bank account with emotions. Every family gathering, every holiday, every phone call filled with concern and love had been them calculating their next withdrawal from the Maya Fund. That night, I did something I had never done before. I changed all my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication on every account, and set up alerts for any unusual activity. If my family wanted to treat me like their personal ATM, it was time to show them what happens when the ATM runs out of money. But first, I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof of what they had been doing to me. Because Maya the doormat was about to disappear, and in her place was going to be someone they had never met before. Someone who played their games better than they did. The next morning, I did something that would have been unthinkable just 48 hours earlier. I called in sick to work, bought a high-quality recording device, and began planning the downfall of my own family. If they wanted to play games with my trust and my money, it was time to show them what a software engineer with nothing left to lose could accomplish. My first step was gathering evidence, real evidence. I spent the entire day calling companies, banks, and service providers using the information I had collected over years of helping my family with their emergencies. What I discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Jessica's mortgage was not just current. It had been paid off completely 2 years ago through an inheritance from her husband's grandmother. The same inheritance she had never mentioned to our family. She owned her house free and clear, and had been collecting my mortgage payments while laughing about it with Marcus. Marcus had never owned a restaurant, never applied for business loans, never even looked into opening one. The $50,000 I gave him for equipment and startup costs had been deposited directly into his personal checking account and spent on luxury items. I found receipts through his social media posts that made me sick. Vacation to Hawaii, designer watches, expensive dinners every night. But my parents were the ones who truly broke my heart. I discovered that my father had been promoted to senior manager at his company 8 months ago, complete with a substantial raise and bonus. The same time period when they started mentioning money troubles more frequently. They were not struggling. They were making more money than ever before, and they were using my guilt and love against me to fund their lifestyle upgrade. I sat in my apartment surrounded by printed bank statements, phone records, and screenshots, feeling like a detective who had just solved a case where she was both the investigator and the victim. But evidence was not enough. I needed them to confess, to admit what they had been doing, because without their own words, they would just deny everything and make me look like the paranoid sister who lost her mind. That was when I remembered something Marcus had said at the restaurant. We should probably slow down soon. They were getting nervous, which meant they were planning something. I needed to know what. I decided to set a trap. On Friday evening, I called Jessica, my voice carefully crafted to sound stressed and overwhelmed. Jess, I need to talk to someone. Work is insane right now, and I am thinking about taking out a loan to help everyone. I hate seeing the family struggle, but my savings account is getting pretty low. The bait was irresistible. Within an hour, Jessica had organized an emergency family meeting for Sunday dinner at our parents' house. She wanted to discuss Maya's financial situation and how we can all help each other. Sunday came, and I arrived at my parents' house with my recording device hidden in my purse, set to record everything. I had practiced looking tired and stressed, and apparently I was convincing because everyone immediately started offering me support and understanding. Maya, honey, my mother said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. We know how hard you work to take care of all of us. Maybe it is time we figured out a different system, my father added, though I noticed his eyes were calculating something. But it was Marcus who gave me exactly what I needed. You know, Maya, maybe you should stop giving us money for a while. Take care of yourself first. The recording device captured every word as I played my part perfectly. But what about Jessica's mortgage and your restaurant loan payments? I cannot just stop helping when you all need me. That was when the facade started cracking. Jessica and Marcus exchanged a look, the same look I had seen at the restaurant. My parents shifted uncomfortably. They realized they had a problem. If I stopped giving them money, they would have to admit they had been lying about needing it, or they would have to find new lies to explain why they still wanted it. Jessica made the first mistake. Actually, Maya, we have been talking, and maybe it is time to be honest about something. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral and concerned. Honest about what? We know you think you have been helping us with emergencies, but sometimes we have been using that money for other things. Not bad things, she added quickly. Just different things. Marcus jumped in clearly, trying to control the narrative. Like sometimes when you send money for one thing, we use it for something else we need more. That is not really lying, is it? I let the silence hang for a moment before responding. What kind of other things? That was when my mother made the biggest mistake of all. Oh, honey, you know how it is. Sometimes Jessica needed the money for groceries instead of the mortgage, or Marcus needed it for his truck payment instead of the restaurant. We never spent it on anything frivolous. So the emergencies were not real? I asked, my voice carefully modulated to sound confused rather than angry. My father cleared his throat. Well, they were real to us at the time. We really did need money, just not always for what we said. I had them, right there on recording, admitting they had been lying to me for years about why they needed money. But I needed more. I needed them to reveal the full scope of their deception. I am confused, I said, playing the part of the hurt but understanding sister. How much of what you have told me has been true? Jessica and Marcus looked at each other again. And in that moment I saw them make a decision. They were going to come clean, probably thinking that honesty would somehow make their betrayal acceptable, that I would forgive them because we were family. Jessica spoke first. Maya, the mortgage has been paid off for 2 years. I inherited money, but we did not want you to stop helping us because we knew you liked feeling needed. Marcus nodded. And I never had a restaurant. I used that money to pay off debt and buy some things I needed. But you seemed so happy to help. My parents looked uncomfortable, but my mother continued the confession. We have been doing well financially for almost a year now, but we did not want to burden you with that information because you have always been so generous. The recording device captured every word of their justification, their twisted logic that somehow made lying to me and stealing my money an act of kindness. They had convinced themselves that they were doing me a favor by letting me feel needed and useful. I sat there for a moment processing their confessions before I stood up from the table. Every eye was on me, waiting for my reaction, expecting me to be hurt, but forgiving the same Maya who always understood, who always put family first. Instead, I pulled out my phone and played back the last 5 minutes of their conversation. The color drained from every face around the table as they heard their own voices, admitting to years of coordinated lies and financial manipulation. The room was dead silent except for the sound of their recorded confessions playing back to them. When the recording ended, I looked around the table at my family. These people who had raised me to believe that blood was thicker than water, that family always came first, that love meant sacrifice. This recording, along with all the financial evidence I have collected over the past week, is going to be very interesting to review with my lawyer tomorrow morning, I said calmly. You are right about one thing, though. It is time for honesty. The aftermath of that dinner was swift and brutal. Within hours of leaving my parents' house, my phone was exploding with calls, texts, and voicemails. Everyone wanted to explain, to justify, to somehow convince me that what they had done was not really that bad. The desperation in their voices would have been satisfying if it had not been so pathetic. But I was not interested in their explanations anymore. I had spent the weekend researching financial fraud laws, and what my family had done to me had crossed several legal lines. In my state, obtaining money through false pretenses was theft, regardless of family relationships. They had stolen over $200,000 from me through a coordinated deception that had lasted for years. Monday morning, I walked into the office of Patricia Hoffman, one of the city's most respected attorneys specializing in financial crimes. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her look both professional and intimidating. When I played her the recording and showed her my financial documentation, her expression never changed, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maya, she said, after reviewing everything, what your family did to you constitutes theft by deception, conspiracy to commit fraud, and potentially elder abuse if we can prove they manipulated your emotional state. This is not a civil matter anymore. This is criminal. The word criminal hit me like a physical blow. My family were criminals. The people who had taught me about honesty and integrity had spent years running a criminal conspiracy against me. Patricia leaned back in her chair. I have to ask, what outcome are you looking for here? Because once we start this process, there is no going back. Criminal charges mean potential jail time, criminal records, consequences that will affect them for the rest of their lives. I thought about Jessica's laughter at the restaurant, Marcus's casual dismissal of my intelligence, my parents' calculated manipulation of my emotions. I want them to face the full consequences of their choices, I said, and I want my money back. Then we proceed, Patricia said. But first, I need you to understand something. This kind of case attracts attention. Financial crimes within families often become public, especially when the amounts are this significant. Are you prepared for that? I nodded. After years of being the family secret keeper, the one who covered up problems and maintained appearances, the idea of everything becoming public felt like freedom rather than shame. Patricia's strategy was methodical and devastating. She filed a police report detailing the financial crimes, provided all my evidence to the district attorney's office, and simultaneously filed civil suits against each family member individually. But her masterstroke was something I never would have thought of. We are going to freeze their assets, she explained. Emergency injunctive relief to prevent them from hiding or spending money while the criminal investigation proceeds. If they have been living off your money for years, they probably do not have significant savings of their own. This will force them to confront the reality of their situation immediately. Within 72 hours, every bank account belonging to my parents, Jessica and Marcus, was frozen pending the investigation. Their credit cards were suspended. Their ability to access cash was completely eliminated. For the first time in years, they were experiencing real financial emergency, not the manufactured crises they had been selling me. The panic was immediate and beautiful to watch. Jessica called me crying, begging me to fix the situation. Marcus showed up at my apartment building, screaming in the lobby until security removed him. My parents sent emails alternating between guilt trips and threats. None of them seemed to understand that this was no longer a family dispute they could manipulate their way out of. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Patricia had recommended I speak with a financial investigator named David Kim, a former federal agent who specialized in tracking fraud patterns. When I met him at his downtown office, he was already studying my case with the intensity of someone who had found something interesting. Maya, he said, spreading out papers across his desk. Your family's pattern of behavior suggests this was not their first time running this kind of operation. Have you ever wondered where they learned to coordinate lies this effectively? The question stopped me cold. I had been so focused on what they had done to me that I had never considered whether they had done it to others. David pulled out a timeline he had created. Look at this pattern. The lies were too sophisticated, too well coordinated for amateurs. Someone taught them how to do this, or they have been practicing on other victims. He was right. The notebook Jessica kept, the casual way they divided responsibilities, Marcus's comment about slowing down because I might figure it out. It all suggested experience and planning that went beyond opportunistic family manipulation. I want to bring in someone who can help us trace their financial history more thoroughly, David said. Someone with resources we do not have access to through normal channels. That someone turned out to be Rebecca Martinez, a forensic accountant who had worked with the FBI before starting her own practice. She was younger than I expected, probably early 30s, with an energy and enthusiasm that reminded me of myself when I was passionate about solving complex coding problems. Financial fraud leaves fingerprints, Rebecca explained when we met at Patricia's office. Every transaction, every lie, every cover-up creates a paper trail. If your family has been doing this to others, or if someone taught them these techniques, we will find evidence of it. What Rebecca discovered over the next 2 weeks changed everything I thought I knew about my family's crimes against me. Using access to banking records provided through the criminal investigation, she traced their financial activities going back 7 years. My family had been running variations of this scam on multiple victims. My cousin Elena, who lived across the country and rarely visited, had been sending them money for medical emergencies for the past 3 years. My uncle Robert, who owned a successful construction company, had been funding their home repairs and car troubles for even longer. They had identified family members who lived far away, who had money, and who cared enough to help during emergencies. But the most shocking discovery was who had taught them how to do it. Rebecca found evidence of regular payments to a financial consultant named Michael Torres, someone who specialized in what he called family wealth redistribution strategies. It was a nice way of saying he taught people how to con their relatives. This Torres character has been coaching them, Rebecca explained, showing me bank records of monthly payments to his consulting firm. He provides scripts, teaches people how to identify vulnerable family members, how to coordinate stories, how to avoid getting caught. Your family was not just stealing from you, they were paying someone to teach them how to steal from you more effectively. The betrayal felt fresh all over again, but this time it was accompanied by something else: validation. I had not been stupid or gullible. I had been the victim of a sophisticated, professionally planned fraud operation run by the people who were supposed to love and protect me. Patricia called an emergency meeting for Friday afternoon. When I arrived at her office, David and Rebecca were already there, along with Detective Sarah Williams from the Financial Crimes Unit. The room felt charged with anticipation. "Maya," Patricia said, "we have enough evidence to pursue serious criminal charges against your family, but we also have evidence of a larger fraud ring involving this Torres character and potentially dozens of other families. The district attorney wants to offer your family a deal." Detective Williams leaned forward. "If your family cooperates fully with our investigation into Torres and provides information about other victims, we can recommend reduced charges. They would still face consequences, but prison time would likely be minimized in exchange for their cooperation." I looked around the room at these people who had become my allies in seeking justice. Just 2 weeks ago, I had been alone, confused, and devastated by my family's betrayal. Now I had a team of professionals working to not only get my money back, but to prevent them from hurting other people the same way they had hurt me. "What kind of cooperation are we talking about?" I asked. "Wearing a wire to meetings with Torres," David explained, "providing documentation of their training and coaching sessions, testifying against him and potentially other coordinators in his network. Essentially helping us take down an entire operation that has been victimizing families across the state." The irony was not lost on me. My family, who had spent years teaching me that blood loyalty meant protecting each other no matter what, would now have to betray their mentor in financial fraud to avoid the harshest consequences of their own crimes. But there was one more surprise waiting for me. Rebecca had been investigating Torres's client list, and she had found something unexpected. Maya, she said, pulling out a file, Torres has been documenting his success stories for marketing purposes. He keeps detailed records of his most successful operations, including projected earnings and victim profiles. Your case was his crown jewel. She handed me a folder labeled Rodriguez Family, Extended Extraction Protocol. Inside was a comprehensive analysis of my personality, my financial situation, my emotional triggers, and a year-by-year plan for extracting money from me over the next decade. Torres had projected that my family could extract over $500,000 from me before I became suspicious enough to investigate. Reading that file was like looking at myself through the eyes of a predator. Every kind gesture, every moment of family connection, every expression of love and concern had been calculated and weaponized against me. They had not just stolen my money, they had stolen my ability to trust my own family. But as I sat in that office surrounded by people who believed me, who had taken my story seriously, who had dedicated their professional expertise to helping me seek justice, I realized something important. Family was not just about blood. It was about people who showed up when you needed them, who fought for you when you could not fight for yourself, who believed you when others dismissed your pain. My biological family had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But my chosen family, Patricia, David, Rebecca, even Detective Williams, had restored my faith in human decency. They had shown me what real loyalty looked like, what authentic support felt like, what it meant to have people in your corner who wanted nothing from you except to see justice done. The question now was whether my biological family would choose to do the right thing for once in their lives, or whether they would continue lying and manipulating until the very end. Either way, I was ready for whatever came next because I was no longer facing it alone. The wire operation was scheduled for the following Tuesday. My family had agreed to cooperate with the investigation into Michael Torres, and Detective Williams had spent Monday afternoon coaching them on how to conduct the meeting naturally while gathering the evidence we needed. Everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly until Rebecca called me at 11:30 Monday night with news that would shatter my newfound confidence in our alliance. Maya, we have a problem, she said, her voice tight with stress. I just received a call from someone claiming to have information about your case. They wanted to meet tonight, said it was urgent. I sat up in bed, immediately alert. What kind of information? They would not say over the phone, but they insisted it was about Torres and your family. Something about the wire operation being compromised. Rebecca paused. Maya, I think someone in our group has been feeding information to the other side. The words hit me like ice water. After everything I had been through, after finally finding people I could trust, the possibility that one of my allies had betrayed me felt like a cruel joke. Who called you? They would not give their name, but they knew details about tomorrow's operation that only our team should know. The location, the time, even the specific questions your family was supposed to ask Torres. Rebecca's voice was grim. Maya, if Torres knows what is coming, he will either refuse to meet or he will be prepared with answers that make him look innocent. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities. Patricia, David. Rebecca, Detective Williams. One of them had sold me out. But why? And to whom? The answer came Tuesday morning when I arrived at Patricia's office for our pre-operation briefing. The conference room was eerily quiet, and Patricia's expression was darker than I had ever seen it. David and Detective Williams were already seated, but Rebecca was notably absent. Maya, Patricia said as soon as I sat down, we need to talk about Rebecca Martinez. My stomach dropped. Rebecca had been the one to discover the Torres connection, the one who had traced my family's financial crimes, the one who had worked tirelessly to build our case. She had also been the one to receive the mysterious phone call warning about the compromised operation. Detective Williams pulled out a file and slid it across the table. We ran a background check on everyone involved in this case as standard procedure. What we found about Rebecca was concerning. The file contained bank records showing that Rebecca had received a $50,000 payment from an offshore account 3 days ago. The same day, she had completed her analysis of Torres's operation. The timing was not coincidental. Rebecca has been feeding information to Torres from the beginning, David explained, his voice filled with disgust. She knew exactly how much evidence we had, what our strategy was, which direction the investigation was heading. She has been playing both sides. I felt like I was reliving the discovery of my family's betrayal all over again. Rebecca had sat in meetings with me, had seemed genuinely outraged by what my family had done, had worked late nights building the case against Torres, and the entire time she had been sabotaging our efforts from the inside. How is that even possible? I asked. She found evidence against Torres. She helped build the case. Patricia's expression was grim. She found evidence she could not hide and presented it in a way that made her look helpful while simultaneously warning Torres about what we knew. Classic double agent behavior. The betrayal was devastating, but worse was what it meant for our case. Torres now knew about the wire operation, knew about my family's willingness to cooperate, knew about every piece of evidence we had collected. He would be prepared for anything we tried to do. Detective Williams leaned forward. Maya, we have a choice to make. We can call off the operation entirely, which means Torres walks away and probably disappears before we can build a new case. Or we can proceed knowing that he is prepared for us, which means the operation will probably fail and your family's cooperation deal will be worthless. I looked around the table at the faces of the people I had trusted with my quest for justice. Patricia looked frustrated but determined. David seemed angry at himself for not catching Rebecca's deception sooner. Detective Williams was clearly calculating our limited options. There is a third choice, I said slowly, an idea forming in my mind. What if we use Rebecca's betrayal against her? Patricia raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Rebecca thinks she has successfully sabotaged our operation, but she does not know that we know about her betrayal. What if we feed her false information about a new plan, something that she will pass along to Torres while we execute a completely different strategy? David's eyes lit up with understanding. A double bluff. We make Torres think he knows what is coming while we hit him from a direction he is not prepared for. Detective Williams was already nodding. It could work, but we would need to be very careful about what information we share and who we share it with. We spent the next hour crafting a deception within a deception. Rebecca would be told that we were calling off the wire operation and instead pursuing a civil lawsuit that would take months to develop. Meanwhile, we would proceed with a modified version of the original plan using different team members and a different approach that Torres would not be expecting. The new plan was riskier and more complex, but it had one advantage that our original strategy lacked. Torres would be overconfident, believing he had successfully neutralized our investigation. That overconfidence would make him careless, and carelessness was exactly what we needed. But first, we had to sell the deception to Rebecca. Patricia called her with the news that we were abandoning the criminal case and pursuing only civil remedies. Rebecca's relief was audible over the speakerphone, confirming our suspicions about her loyalties. I think that is the smart choice, Rebecca said, her voice carefully modulated to sound disappointed rather than relieved. The criminal case was always going to be difficult to prove. A civil suit gives us more control over the process. After the call ended, Patricia looked at me with something approaching admiration. You realize what you just did? You successfully manipulated someone who has been manipulating you for weeks. That takes courage and intelligence. But I did not feel courageous or intelligent. I felt tired and betrayed and angry that even in my pursuit of justice, I had to deal with people who saw me as nothing more than a means to their own financial gain. Rebecca's betrayal somehow hurt worse than my family's because I had chosen to trust her. My family's betrayal was personal, but Rebecca's was professional. She had taken money to sabotage my search for justice, and that felt like a violation of something sacred. The rest of Tuesday was spent preparing for our real operation, the one Rebecca and Torres knew nothing about. Detective Williams had brought in federal agents who specialized in financial fraud agents who had been tracking Torres for months as part of a larger investigation into fraud coaching networks. Your case was the break we needed, Agent Sarah Morrison explained during our evening briefing. Torres has been operating across multiple states, but he has been careful to avoid federal jurisdiction. Your family's wire transfers crossed state lines, which gives us the authority we needed to take him down. The federal involvement changed everything. This was no longer just about getting my money back or seeing my family face consequences for their crimes. Torres was part of a network that had been victimizing families across the country, and our case was the key to shutting down an operation that had stolen millions of dollars from unsuspecting relatives. As I drove home that night, I realized that Rebecca's betrayal, as painful as it was, had actually strengthened our case. It had forced us to bring in federal resources, had made us more careful and strategic, and had revealed the true scope of what we were fighting against. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Jessica. "Maya, please call me. We need to talk about what happens tomorrow." For a moment, I felt the old pull of family obligation, the familiar desire to protect and comfort her even after everything she had done. But then I remembered the notebook where she had tracked her lies to me, the restaurant where she and Marcus had celebrated stealing my money, the anniversary dinner where she had called me the Family ATM while everyone laughed. I deleted the text without responding. Jessica would find out what happened tomorrow when everyone else did. For the first time in my life, my family's emotional needs were not my responsibility. I had my own life to rebuild, my own trust, to restore, my own future to reclaim. Tomorrow would determine whether justice was possible or whether the people who had hurt me would continue to escape consequences through manipulation and betrayal. Either way, I was done being their victim. Wednesday morning arrived with an unexpected phone call that would change everything. At 6 a.m., before I had even finished my first cup of coffee, Detective Williams called with news that made me sit down hard in my kitchen chair. "Maya, we just arrested Rebecca Martinez at her apartment. She was in the process of destroying evidence and preparing to flee the state. But that is not the important part." Williams paused for effect. "She had Torres on the phone when we broke down her door. He was instructing her to eliminate all traces of their collaboration, which means he knows the walls are closing in. This was not part of our plan. Torres was supposed to remain unaware of our investigation until we were ready to spring our trap. If he knew we were onto Rebecca, our entire carefully constructed deception was worthless." "There is something else," Williams continued. "Rebecca was not working alone. She had an accomplice inside the district attorney's office who was feeding her information about our case. Someone with access to our files, our strategy, our evidence." The betrayal kept spreading like a virus, infecting every level of the investigation. How many people had been working against me? How deep did this corruption go? Who? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. "Assistant District Attorney Michael Crawford. He has been taking payments from Torres for over 2 years, sabotaging fraud investigations before they could gain momentum. Your case was just the latest one he tried to kill." I felt dizzy with the implications. Crawford had been present during several of our strategy meetings. He had reviewed our evidence, had access to our plans, had been in position to undermine everything we were trying to accomplish. No wonder previous victims of Torres's network had never achieved justice. The system itself had been compromised. But Williams was not finished. "Maya, there is one more thing. When we arrested Rebecca, she was carrying something you need to see." An hour later, I was sitting in the police station conference room, staring at a laptop computer that contained the most damning evidence I had ever seen. Rebecca had been recording her conversations with Torres, presumably as insurance, in case their partnership went wrong. What she had captured was a complete confession of everything Torres had been doing, including detailed discussions about my family's case. The recordings were devastating. Torres's voice clear and unmistakable, describing me as the perfect mark and praising my family's natural talent for emotional manipulation. He detailed his coaching sessions with them, his scripts for extracting maximum money from me, his long-term plan for bleeding me dry over the next decade. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Agent Morrison, who had been analyzing the computer's contents, called me into a separate room with an expression I could not read. "Maya," she said, "we found communications between Torres and someone else involved in your case, someone who has been helping him from the very beginning." She handed me a printed email exchange that made my blood run cold. The messages were between Torres and my uncle Robert, the successful construction company owner, who I had discovered was also being victimized by my family's lies. Except Robert was not a victim. He was a partner. The emails revealed that Robert had been the one to connect my family with Torres in the first place. He had recommended Torres's services to them after successfully using similar tactics on his own extended family members for years. Robert was not being conned by my family. He was their mentor in the art of family financial fraud. "Your Uncle Robert has been running this operation for over a decade," Morrison explained. "He identifies family members with money and emotional vulnerabilities, then coaches relatives on how to exploit them." Torres was essentially working as a subcontractor for Robert's larger operation. The revelation recontextualized everything. The sophisticated coordination, the professional-level deception, the careful psychological manipulation. It all made sense now. Robert had years of experience victimizing his own family members, and he had taught my parents and siblings how to do the same thing to me. I thought about every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every casual conversation, where Robert had seemed so interested in my career success, my financial situation, my generous nature. He had been gathering intelligence, identifying my weaknesses, planning my exploitation alongside the people who were supposed to love and protect me. How many others? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. Morrison consulted her notes. "Based on what we found in Rebecca's files and Torres's communications, we estimate at least 30 families across 6 states. The network has stolen over $3 million from victims over the past 7 years. $3 million, 30 families. Years of coordinated fraud targeting the most vulnerable human emotion, love for family. The scope of the operation was staggering, and my case was just one small part of a much larger criminal enterprise." But Morrison had one more surprise for me. "Maya, there is something else you should know. We have been investigating this network for 18 months, but we have never had a victim willing to cooperate to this extent. Most people discover what their families have done and choose to handle it privately rather than pursuing criminal charges." She pulled out a thick file folder. "Your willingness to pursue justice, to gather evidence, to record conversations, and work with law enforcement has given us the breakthrough we needed to take down the entire operation. Without your case, Torres and Robert would still be operating freely, victimizing more families." The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming. My personal quest for justice had become something much larger, something that would protect other families from experiencing the betrayal and financial devastation that I had endured. But there was still the question of what would happen to my own family. They had been small players in Robert's larger scheme, recruited and coached, rather than leading the operation. That would count in their favor during sentencing, but it did not absolve them of responsibility for their choices. "What happens to them now?" I asked. Morrison's expression was sympathetic but firm. "They will face charges, but their cooperation in taking down Robert and Torres will be considered during sentencing. They are looking at restitution, probation, and community service, rather than significant jail time." The justice felt incomplete. Years of lies and financial theft, and they would probably avoid any real consequences because they had been following someone else's playbook. But then, Morrison showed me one final piece of evidence that changed my perspective entirely. "Maya, we found this in Torres's files. It is his assessment of your family's operation." The document was a performance review of sorts, rating my family's effectiveness at various aspects of financial fraud. But the section that stood out was Torres's analysis of their long-term sustainability. The Rodriguez siblings show exceptional natural talent for emotional manipulation, Torres had written. However, their target, Maya, is beginning to show signs of suspicion and financial strain. Recommend transitioning to new family targets within 12 months to avoid exposure. My family had not been planning to come clean or stop their lies. They had been planning to move on to victimizing other family members once they had drained me completely. The casual cruelty of that assessment, the reduction of their own sister and daughter to a resource to be exploited until exhausted, was the final piece of evidence I needed to feel confident about the consequences they would face. Agent Morrison stood up and extended her hand. Maya, on behalf of the FBI and all the families who will be protected because of your courage, thank you. What you did took incredible strength, and you should be proud of the impact you have made. As I shook her hand, I realized that something fundamental had changed inside me. I was no longer Maya the victim, Maya the doormat, Maya the family ATM. I was Maya the survivor, Maya the fighter, Maya the woman who had taken down a criminal network because she refused to accept that love should cost everything she had worked for. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation with Torres and Robert, the moment when years of lies and manipulation would be exposed in court. My family would face the consequences of their choices and justice would finally be served. But tonight, I was going home to my apartment, to my life, to my future, that no one could steal from me anymore. For the first time in years, I was truly free. The federal courthouse was packed on Thursday morning when United States versus Robert Martinez, Michael Torres, and Associates went to trial. I sat in the front row, flanked by Agent Morrison and Detective Williams, watching as my Uncle Robert was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. He looked older than I remembered, smaller, somehow diminished by the weight of his crimes being exposed to the world. Across the aisle, my parents sat with Jessica and Marcus, all of them pale and nervous. They had taken plea deals in exchange for their testimony against Robert and Torres, but they still faced sentencing for their role in the fraud network. We had not spoken since that recorded dinner at my parents' house, and I felt nothing but hollow emptiness when I looked at them. The trial was swift and devastating. Federal prosecutors presented evidence that painted a picture of a criminal enterprise that had operated for over a decade, stealing millions from unsuspecting family members across multiple states. Torres, who had been arrested trying to flee the country with Rebecca Martinez, sat stone-faced as recording after recording played his voice coaching people on how to emotionally manipulate their relatives. But it was Robert's testimony that truly revealed the scope of what had been done to me and so many others. Under cross-examination, he described his business model with the detached professionalism of someone discussing legitimate consulting work. Family members are the perfect targets, he explained to the shocked courtroom. They already trust you, they want to help, and they rarely verify the stories you tell them, because that would feel like a betrayal of family loyalty. It is psychology, not rocket science. When asked about my specific case, Robert showed no remorse. Maya was ideal because she had money, lived alone, and had been taught from childhood that family obligations came first. Her parents did exactly what I told them to do, and it worked perfectly for years. Listening to my uncle describe my exploitation as a business strategy, hearing him reduce my love and generosity to psychological weaknesses to be exploited, I felt the final pieces of my old family loyalty crumble away. These people were strangers who happened to share my DNA. They were not my family in any meaningful sense of the word. The sentencing phase brought a satisfaction I had not expected. Torres received 8 years in federal prison, plus full restitution to all victims. Robert, as the ringleader, got 12 years plus restitution. Rebecca Martinez received 5 years for her role in obstructing justice. Assistant District Attorney Crawford, whose corruption had allowed the network to operate for years, was sentenced to 10 years and disbarred from practicing law. My parents, Jessica and Marcus, each received 2 years of probation community service, and were ordered to pay full restitution of the money they had stolen from me. But more importantly to me, they were required to participate in family counseling and financial responsibility education as part of their sentence. Judge Patricia Henderson addressed them directly before imposing sentence. You betrayed the most sacred trust that exists between human beings. You weaponized love-corrupted family bonds and treated your daughter and sister as nothing more than a source of income. The damage you have done to her ability to trust others may never be fully repaired. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with my real allies, Agent Morrison, Detective Williams, Patricia Hoffman, and David Kim. These people had believed me when my own family had been lying to me. They had fought for me when I could not fight for myself. They had restored my faith in human decency. What happens next? Agent Morrison asked. Next, I rebuild, I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. I have my money back, I have my freedom back, and I have learned the difference between people who care about me and people who want something from me. The restitution payments would take years to complete, but the frozen assets had already returned most of my stolen money to my accounts. More importantly, I had learned to set boundaries, to question manipulation, to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new house, a beautiful craftsman bungalow that I had bought with my recovered savings, when I got an unexpected visitor. It was Patricia Hoffman, but this was not a legal visit. Maya, she said, sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee. I have a proposition for you. I am starting a nonprofit organization to help families who have been victimized by financial fraud. We need someone who understands what it feels like to be betrayed by family, someone who can help other victims navigate the legal system and rebuild their lives. The offer was perfect, in a way I could not have imagined when this nightmare began. My experience, as painful as it had been, could be used to help others avoid the same devastation. I could turn my trauma into purpose, my betrayal into a mission to protect other families from similar exploitation. What would you call this organization? I asked. Patricia smiled. We were thinking Maya's Foundation for Family Financial Justice, if that is okay with you. A year later, Maya's foundation had helped 37 families recover over $1 million in stolen assets and had assisted in prosecuting 12 separate fraud networks across 8 states. I testified before state legislatures about closing loopholes in family fraud laws. I spoke at conferences about recognizing the signs of financial manipulation. I had found my calling in helping others reclaim their power from people who had abused their trust. But the most meaningful moment came 18 months after the trial, when I received a letter from a woman in Oregon whose adult children had been systematically stealing from her for years. She had seen my story on a victim advocacy website and had found the courage to seek help. Dear Maya, her letter read, I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was imagining things. Your story helped me realize that I was not paranoid. I was being victimized. Because of your courage to speak out, I found the strength to fight back. My children are now in counseling, and I am rebuilding my life. Thank you for showing me that family should lift you up, not tear you down. That letter sits framed on my office wall next to pictures of my chosen family. Patricia, Agent Morrison, Detective Williams, David Kim, and the dozens of fraud survivors I have worked with over the past 2 years. These relationships, built on mutual respect and genuine care, have taught me what healthy family dynamics actually look like. I still get calls from my biological family occasionally. Voicemails apologizing, explaining, asking for another chance to prove they have changed. I listen to them sometimes, but I never call back. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation, and healing does not require giving people more opportunities to hurt you. The woman who used to drop everything to solve her family's manufactured emergencies no longer exists. In her place is someone stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who value her for who she is rather than what she can provide. Maya. The ATM is gone forever. Maya, the advocate. Maya, the survivor. Maya, the chosen daughter of a family that actually deserves her love. She is here to stay. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your kindness was being weaponized against you? Have you questioned whether the people asking for help actually need it, or whether they just see you as an easy target? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story matters, and there might be someone watching who needs to hear that they are not alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to my channel because I share stories about overcoming family trauma, setting boundaries, and building the life you actually deserve. And share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Because sometimes all it takes is one person saying, "You deserve better," to change everything. Thank you for joining me on this journey from victim to survivor to advocate. Remember, family is not about who shares your blood. It is about who shows up when you need them, who celebrates your success without jealousy, and who loves you without conditions or costs attached. Until next time, keep fighting for the respect and love you deserve. You are worth so much more than being anyone's ATM, and do not let anyone convince you otherwise.